You know what bothers me about the whole system, and you're probably going to say this, but I just don't. I just think it's a stupid system. Why do I have to sit here with my alarm? Like, there's a Discord bot that has an alarm when the trader
Oh,
resets.
really?
Yeah, it's like this is not good game mechanics. Like, why is the fuel like five like 25%, 20% of the cost of what it's selling for the flea market? Like it just doesn't like it's I just can't Giga. I can't. It's such a stupid mechanic. Why am I sitting here spamming refresh to buy the fuel so I can save 500 rupees? Because why would I like, what's the point? I mean, why is Jaeger so stupid that he can't just increase his prices? BSG has to manually increase the price,
Yeah.
like it's not going to surprise me. And then you got the whole thing with the Bitcoin price, right? So it's like this outside economy in a controlled economy environment. So they have this like unpredictable, like people in the real world don't even know what Bitcoin's going to do. So they're trying to like, oh god, we got to reel this back. Let's increase solar power, GPU craft. Let's up that, guys. They're like melting over here. Like why? Like okay, I think it was a cool idea. It was really cool, but the it was a cool idea. It's not.
Yeah, you're saying
Bitcoin's
like
breaking the game right now. They're
yeah.
trying so hard to reel it back. And then what tomorrow it could crash. And then what? We're just gonna have to like what are they gonna do? Be like, all right, patch 12.9.1, we're undoing every change to the to all the changes we made. Like fuel's back in stock, boys. Go get it. You know what I mean? Like, what's going on, dude?
It's very strange. It is quite strange. I quite like the thing is, right, so like there's lots of problems that I have with the system, but I quite like what's happening in a general sense.
Welcome to ScavTalk, an Escape from Tarkov podcast with a focus on the continuing development of the game, content creation, patch analysis, theory crafting, and general gameplay discussions. I'm one of your hosts, Church,
And I'm your other host, GigaBeef.
and welcome to the show. Oh, how's it going, Giga? How you been?
It's going good. It's going good. It's going good. I think the biggest highlight for me right now is
Mm-hmm.
my new rig.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably by far the biggest highlight for me at the moment. It came last Saturday in the morning. I spent most of the day putting it together and did my first stream with it because I managed to get it all up and running just in time.
Nice.
Managed to cobble together enough of the systems to make it function. It was actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I guess it's the joy of a pre-build in some ways. I've never had a pre-build before, and because I normally make my own, but yeah, the rarity of these GPUs is really the only way to probably
Yeah.
get one. But yeah, it's been amazing. The NVENC encoder is fantastic. Like the stream looks great. The recordings look brilliant. I think the only downside is that I recorded the 3-hour stream and
Mm-hmm.
it was at a decent quality. So we're gonna have to see how the next one is. But it was like 68 gig,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
a
pretty
really big file.
junky. So it gets quite extreme.
Yeah.
And I know like in the past I've had some issues editing these kind of things. If you try to just like bring them into Premiere Pro, for
Mm.
example, it has some problems. So I have another program that like cuts stuff up into smaller pieces. But I'm actually not sure if it's going to even be an issue anymore because it's all on like an M2 disk, which is amazingly quick. And
Yeah.
so it's pretty fantastic. But no, I'm very pleased with it. It's excellent. I really didn't like the quality of some of the YouTube stuff. It's quite interesting because like half the people I've had to look at the stats just to kind of get an idea because like sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
get comments from people being like, "Oh, the quality's not very good," and blah blah. And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And I think 50% of people are on mobile and 50% of people are on desktop. And the people on mobile don't notice because it's small enough
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter. Whereas
Yeah.
there's a subset of people who are sat there with like I don't know 144 hertz, like super
Yeah.
curved widescreen crazy monitors, and they blow up my YouTube, and it's just like, oh no, it looks awful. Oh god, and they type in just like, what are you running it on? Some kind of potato, and you're like, oh, I know it's terrible. So hopefully this will fix that, and it won't look completely scuffed anymore. So
When you
good.
export your project, do you export it to 1080p or
I
does
used
it
to, yeah, I did,
okay, yeah.
even though I was actually recording my streams in
It's
720,
right.
which is a little
Yeah.
bit of a cheat, but I think you get a slightly better encoder on YouTube. when you do that, and
Mm,
so
interesting.
you get a slightly higher quality processing, even if it's a 720p video.
I see.
It looks slightly better. Um, and I needed all the help I could get,
Yeah.
to be honest. So, but no, look, it's insane, right? It's like, yeah, it makes big files, but hopefully I'll be able to manage that, and I've got some decent storage and stuff. But it's just like it's crazy to like go back and look at some of the footage and be like, okay, I've got it full screen on my monitor, and it looks like the actual game's playing on my screen. Like this is crazy. This is crazy, and to do that at the same time streaming as well, like it's mental.
Yeah.
It's
That's
mental.
pretty
Just
cool.
like the distribution of system resources using the NVENC encoder is just fantastic. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited. It's a big moment, and it kind of coincided quite nicely with 20K subs. So it's kind of like a milestone. Like
Yeah.
let's upgrade this thing. It's getting decent, and people are giving a lot of support and stuff. So it's yes, get a present for myself and the stream and the channel, and move on from there. So it's good. How
So
have you been?
what's it like finally hitting 60 FPS on customs?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's nice. I mean, the thing is, like before, it was never too bad. It was okay, but I had to avoid using like monstrums, four
Scopes.
times is yeah, 'cause that would
Yes.
just destroy my
Yeah.
computer. That was always the biggest problem. So you go like, oh, the picture in picture, and you're like, okay, now I'm running at like 48 frames or something, or like
Yeah, that's
52
rough.
frames, and it just like it does weird stuff, right? I'm not Tarkov's not the most optimized game as we know, and it starts to do weird
Mhm.
things like you get some kind of input lag sometimes when the frames drop below 60. It's like it's a bit weird. Um, and so to not have any of that, the game feels super snappy, and I genuinely think it helps. Like I think in other games it probably doesn't help as much, but in Tarkov it helps a lot just because. And I think like I've kind of experienced this like ups and downs as well because as they tinker with the game, like different setups and different pieces of hardware play better or worse on different maps. So I've actually had patches where I run 60 FPS all the time, even with a scope. And I've had other times, which is kind of like the latest series where it's kind of back to normal, which is it's like most of the time it's 60, but then if it gets a bit busy, it might be like like mid 50s, and then with the scope, it's like in
Mhm.
the high 40s, something like that. And you can really tell between those different eras of more optimized versus less optimized on your particular system. Because I know there's like some people who have amazing hardware who don't really get that
Yeah.
great FPS, and some people have like decent hardware, but sort of not top end, and they have like amazing performance on Tarkov. And so it really just depends on like what system you've got. So I've
Yeah.
definitely been through ups and downs myself, and like felt what it's like to play with both. And when the game just feels super snappy, it's like it does actually change it quite significantly. Feels like you're playing something else, like one of the other more polished shooters. Um, I think I think it's an advantage that people don't necessarily realize is actually
So
quite
it can
big.
be a huge difference in my
Mm,
opinion.
yeah, it
Just
can
have
be.
even just stable 60, not having this drop, you know?
Mm, mm. Yeah, because I know a lot of people are running like 144 hertz these days. I think I don't know. I'm not sure if I'd move up to that. It's don't know if it's necessary. I'm also a bit scared to like try it because I think it's one of those things that once you do, probably feels like going back to like 30 FPS when you're playing at 60 normally, that kind of thing. I'm just like, oh god, I can play fine at 60. Like if I go to 144, am I going to get stuck there and go, like, oh, I really, oh, now I'm gonna have to, do all sorts of things because
Yeah.
I don't hit 144 even with a new rig.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna
that's
say I've
partly because I'm streaming and recording at the same time and playing the game. It's a one system setup.
yeah, I'm pretty sure for 144 hertz or 120 hertz, you gotta
Yeah,
have, like, a stable frame rate to match the refresh rate to even get the advantage,
yeah, yeah. I
uh,
think the
to my
only other way to
knowledge.
do it is like you have one of those new technologies which like VSync or something where you've got the one of
G-Sync
those or
or
G-Sync or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I mean, G-Sync, where you've got like, I mean, it's quite cool that when your monitor's like literally just only updates every time it gets a
Mhm,
frame, which is pretty
mhm.
cool. But I didn't bother dabbling with any of that. Just stick to
Yeah.
tried and
Keep it
tested
simple
for the
for
time
now,
being.
yeah.
Exactly.
The next upgrade will be a 144 30-inch curve full screen.
Three PC setup, one for recording, one for streaming, one for gaming.
Chat monitor, second monitor, third monitor,
Yeah, that's the way.
oh,
That is the way. How's How's your Tarkov been going, or your general experience?
Good. I haven't played a ton of Tarkov, but I got last weekend. I got DayZ because it was on sale. I was like, been wanting to try this game out. Let me go ahead and buy because it's on sale. And man, it's just I don't know. I got so many thoughts on it. I just
Like
it's a fun game, but God, there's a lot of running.
like a very short kind of like. Well, how what was your like? Because you never played it before, right?
Yeah, I never played it before. So I mean, coming into it, it's really ironic because I'm like, man, this reminds me so much of Tarkov, but it's like DayZ came first, not Tarkov.
Yeah,
I almost wanted to be like, man, they really took a lot of inspiration from Tarkov, but I think it's the opposite way.
yeah, 100%, 100%.
But
DayZ to me is like it's like the pure game. DayZ.
mhm.
DayZ's like it's kind of closer to sort of like realism's the wrong word because realism can mean all sorts of different things, but it's closer to kind of like real life is probably what I want to say. In that you spend a lot of your time messing about, and only a very small
Yeah,
amount of your time is spent like actually doing the like really involved raids and that kind of thing. The rest of it's just like spent trying to keep yourself alive. I mean, I don't know how your experience has been. I don't know, I'm not sure how much you've played, but when I went back to DayZ,
mhm.
I actually really, really struggled to get back into it. Even though I played it a lot back in the day, and I was like, I can't even keep myself alive anymore. Like I'd forgotten half the stuff, and I think they've changed a lot of things to make it really. And it's quite difficult on vanilla to not
Yeah,
just immediately die over and over and over and
yeah.
over and over again.
Well, that was like kind of when I first played, I was playing vanilla, and I sort of thought of it more as like this is the experience of DayZ, where it's like I'm literally struggling to survive. That's like part of the experience, you
Yeah.
know. Like I was dying to zombies.
Hmm.
I was like just dying because I didn't know how to do certain things, you know? Because the game doesn't really have any instructions on anything, you just have
No,
to, like,
no,
figure
it
it
just dumps
out.
you on the shoreline, and it's just like there you go.
Yeah, good which maybe you could be like, "That's part of the experience," but anyways, um, yeah, and then I switched to some modded servers where it was more, like, PvP oriented, like, it was almost like Tarkov in a way where you, like, start off with ruples, and then they have, like, this
Uh,
modded ATM where you could withdraw your ruples, and then there's, like, these vending machines where you could buy guns and mods and ammo and stuff, and so that was kinda interesting, and you could sell stuff to the traders, and there was, like, different traders on the map, like, I was like,
yeah.
this is kinda interesting."
See, I think this is the problem that I had was that because I played Daisy Vanilla previously, I kind of thought like, yeah, that's what I want to do, and I never like I ended up reading around it afterwards because when I picked it back up again recently, I spent like probably 4 to 5 hours dying on vanilla on
Wow.
repeat before going because I was like, I'm very stubborn and
Yeah, it's
I'm like, I'm gonna make this work, right? This must be workable. And then reading around online, just being like, okay, like what's the deal? And everyone's like, don't play vanilla, play modded. It was pretty much like the I don't know the consensus online, which I don't know, kind of saddened me a bit because I quite like the old Daisy experience. But
yeah,
anyway,
I kinda agree, I like that the goal because I was actually really surprised, I was expecting a lot more players for the map size, but,
mm,
for
yeah,
vanilla for what I was playing on, it was only 60,
there's
and
hardly anyone.
really, most of the players were at the freshies, if you will, were
Yeah,
at the starting area.
yeah.
So I
There's
was
like
like,
most of the time you die to hunger and stuff rather than like getting shot.
yeah, yeah, it was very it's different, you know, it's something I haven't experienced before, so it was
It's like
very
it's much more on the survival angle than it is on the kind of
yes,
like looter
it
shooter angle.
yes, it plays really hard into
Yeah.
that,
And
yeah,
it gets there later on. Like it goes more looter shooter later, but the beginning is like Don't Starve. If you've ever played that.
don't starve
Uh,
together, yeah,
yeah, which is just like crazy. So it's a bit more like that, or like the beginning of Minecraft when you have no idea what you're doing.
yeah,
And then it kind of like progresses into more like Tarkov-esque kind of towards the end, which is like kind of what Tarkov's taking away.
sure,
They've like removed all of that to begin with. They've removed all of the survival bit
yes,
because when you sit in your base, it's just like your health. This is like that's the fundamental difference, right? If you sit in your base in Tarkov, your health and like stats go up. If you sit in your base in
mhm,
DayZ, your food and stuff goes down. So the more time you spend like, messing around, just poking rocks, then you just die in DayZ. But it did
which I
seem,
like.
yeah, I liked it too, but it did seem very convoluted to actually get yourself started when I tried.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you have to start the ground running. Like you have to, if you don't have food on you, you got to go get food immediately.
Yeah,
And then, like, depending on the elements, you may have to like deal with being wet and catching a cold. Like
yeah,
that's kind of the part that I liked was like I felt like I constantly had to be keeping track of multiple, you know, things. Like I had to make sure my clothing was good, my food was good. I had to make sure like I wasn't dying to zombies. I had something to fight zombies with. Like there was like just a lot of like things I had to constantly micromanage, which I liked. Um the part I didn't like was running around in the dark
yeah,
or having to like you know, my stamina bar be half because I had too many items on me and I had to like constantly sprint, stop sprinting, sprint, stop sprinting just to travel. Like it was, yeah, the running part's awful, but
yeah. We used to call it a running
it's fun.
simulator back in the day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which that's the nice thing about Tarkov is like they cut out a lot of that like fat, if you will, and it's just like straight to
Yeah,
the shooting part, you
yeah,
know.
exactly.
Even though
Like,
they have like that thermometer icon, the hydration, energy, like they have those survival elements in there. It's just not fully
yeah,
implemented yet,
exactly. And
you
like,
should say.
it's not even really like a focus. I would say, like, it's
Yeah,
even the
it's more
stuff
like a
like
sub.
food and water is kind of like
Right.
it exists in the game and it's there to like annoy you and you have to like deal with it sometimes. But it's not like a core element of the gameplay, if you know what I
Right.
mean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
it's an
sure.
interesting one. It's an interesting one. I've always said that like DayZ for me is kind of like the original game, and then there's like two spiritual spin-offs that you can take it. One is PUBG, where you because the problem with DayZ is that there's no like the action isn't forced in any way. Like you could just not see anybody for weeks if you so wished, just by staying in empty areas of the map. And so there's no
Hmm.
real there's no requirement to see anybody else. And if you want to play it that way, then that's fine. But it means that there's like even if you do want to see people, there's kind of like vast expanses of time where less nothing happens. And so there's kind of
Yeah.
like there's two kind of like spiritual ways for it. PUBG is like the most obvious because it's just like, well, we'll just take like a
Right.
DayZ-esque situation and DayZ-esque map, and then we'll just like put a circle on it and shrink it down so that people are forced to be like right next to each other and then they have to kill each other. And it's last man standing. So that's easy. And then Tarkov's kind of like the other way of spinning it, which I'd never really thought about until it came out, which is like, okay, well, you've got the limited amount of time. You don't have to kill everybody, but you've got to move through the map to the other end. And the way that the maps are designed, like that was the one thing that struck me about Tarkov when I first played it, was how the maps are designed and customs in particular, just because it's like a ton of walls and there's blocks in the way and there's like the factory sort of shortcut, but you need a key for it. And like
Hmm.
this was before the expansion, to be fair. So
Yeah.
it is a little bit more open now, but there's a lot of blockades in
It's sort of
Tarkov
like,
maps in general. There's a lot of
hmm,
pinch points and stuff that kind of like designed and built into the game. Even somewhere like Shoreline, which is mostly open, but you've got to cross the stream
yes,
somehow.
that's true. Yeah.
And I think that map design is quite interesting, and it kind of like it forces the action because it's like, well, people are going to go to the loot spots, but then also you might see somebody on the way out even if you don't want to because you've got to get through somehow through the middle. Um, and so that's kind of like the other way of doing it, which is quite nice because you can kind of decide on what you want to do, and you can have a short raid or a fat or a long raid. It just depends really on what you want, and I quite like that. It keeps more of the self-directedness of DayZ and cutting out a lot of the rubbish. Whereas yeah, PUBG is obviously a lot more arcadey. I mean, fun, but it's a lot more arcadian RNG style. You kind of like you choose your raid in Tarkov, right? Whereas PUBG is determined by the circle, and sometimes the circle screws you.
And to your point, I think you could even make the argument that Tarkov is survival in that you have to survive going from point A to point B to extract to fight other players on your way, if that
Yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense.
exactly. And you don't have to fight them either. So like your route is as important as anything else.
Mhm.
But the only constraints are the time limits and the extracts that you're given, which I think is cool because then it's like, well, then you can decide what you want to do. You can go straight away. You can go and do what you need to do and leave. You can sit
You
around in
could
a
take
bush
your
for 30
time.
minutes and go and
Yeah,
make dinner or something and then come back if you want. Like it's really
you
up to
could.
you.
Yeah.
And I think that level of flexibility is nice. There was actually one thing that I've started just struggled more and more with as I've got older and had more responsibilities and that kind of thing. It's just like some of the timing. Whereas the beautiful thing about Tarkov is if you only have 10 minutes, you can just go and play factory, which has actually been a great appeal to me because like if you only have 10 minutes, you can't really play PUBG because if you're going to win, it's going
Yeah.
to take 40 minutes. There's not much you can do about that. And so I think that flexibility is awesome. You can kind of like, you can make your own experience in that way, and you can decide how long you want to be in raid for. And it's it's good. It's good. It's one of the big plus points for me on EFT that I think people don't really ever talk about.
Yeah.
Talking Tarkov,
Mhm.
should we move into what changed this week? Probably should have started with that before we went on about other stuff, but it's fine. We can talk about
Yeah.
it now. We can talk about it now.
Yeah.
So, what did we have? Yeah, we had the patch that came
What was
out.
it? 12.09? Was that, like, the official?
I don't even keep a notice of the numbers. Honest, if I'm honest, it's just
Yeah.
a new
I don't
patch
know.
within the latest
Yeah.
patch. I don't even bother trying. I don't even bother trying. But like, I skimmed through the notes as well, and it's mostly just like bug fixes and this kind of stuff.
Yes, yes.
I think.
I
Um,
I did wanna ask you, did you
mm,
play the patch when it first came out?
I actually didn't. I actually
You didn't?
didn't
Okay.
because I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, because I did, and as I was loading into the game, I looked on Twitter, and Volley Lokes, someone I follow, he was saying that Ergo got changed, and I was like, "Oh, interesting." So immediately I went to the hideout, and
Hmm.
sure enough, it was like my M4 and HK that was like, 50 ergo and like 46 ergo felt like it was 0 ergo, like it was really slow Giga. I was like, "Oh my god, what have they done?" So I started like playing around with the mods and then yeah, apparently it was bugged, they said. I
I
don't
think
know if
so. I think so. I think it was something
but
to do like what I read. It was
but
something to do with
was
the
it
weight,
bugged?
or was it
In
just a
quotation
test?
marks. Was it an accidental thing they copied to the patch?
Like, oh
Because it
no, whoops, sorry, we
right,
put the next
yeah,
patch's ergo changes in this patch by
yeah.
mistake. I mean, it was a bug. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
yeah. I don't
'Cause
know.
I heard different things. I heard someone say that weight mattered of your gun, and then someone said that weight mattered of your PMC, and then I saw clips of people using pistols, and the ADS was, like, insane. Like, it was literally, like, 1 millisecond, like,
Like
less than 1 millisecond.
instantaneous.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then whereas, like, 40 ergo felt like 0 ergo, but the HKs are I mean, that I think they're pretty heavy. They were, like, 4 close to 4 kilograms,
Mm,
and I didn't have time to test, like, a light gun, but
yeah.
I'm super, like, interested what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm interested too. I mean, it's got to be part of the whole like slowing the gameplay down kind of thing, right? It must be. But I don't know. I think that one of the issues that they have to be careful with, and I think we kind of have touched on this in the past a little bit, is that the worse
Mhm.
they make it. Well, most people care about ergo for ADS speed, really. It's kind of
Yeah, it's
helps with like,
pretty much
yeah, kind of helps a bit with like stamina for holding ADS, sort of. But
right.
because of like the way that the peaking advantage sort of works in Tarkov, you don't normally want to just like hold an angle. So it doesn't matter as much. Normally people lie down for that stuff with sniper rifles. So I feel like that matters a bit less. And then the sound like kind of matters a bit. But like if you're making any
Mhm.
sound, that's like you may as well be making a loud sound. I'm not sure if it really matters. Like if it's not silent, like someone can hear it, and so I'm not sure it matters too much. So people really just care about like the ADS speed. And the thing they have to be careful about is because point shooting is so good,
Yes.
they have to be careful that they don't nerf ADS so that everyone just literally runs around and point fires at everybody because it's
Yes.
it doesn't matter for ergo. Like I've actually had a lot of fun this week finishing off some of the shotgun quests, and I've been running around on factory with a 20 like round drum Saiga with AP20 in it
Yes.
with
I
like
love it.
zero ergonomics and just point shooting it with a laser. I literally don't ADS this weapon.
That's
It's
a
crazy.
good
Over
way to
any
do it.
distance. Over any distance. Just in factory, it's just like, nah. We're just gonna be firing from the hip, boys. It's very good. It's very good. So I think they just
I
have to
bet
be
that
careful that they don't mess that up because otherwise it changes kind of like the meta of what people will do.
yeah, and I think to sort of tie it back in a little bit with what we were talking about earlier,
Mm.
one thing that I found interesting with DayZ, and this also ties into a video I watched from FairTX, was how they handled your, like, aiming of your gun. So, like, by default, your guns, if I understood correctly, it's not hip fire, but it's, like, just you're holding it, but you're not really aiming at anything, right?
Yeah. You're talking
Instead,
Tarkov here or
like,
DayZ?
DayZ.
Okay.
And to aim, you have to, I guess it's like your point firing, so to speak. You have to hold, what is it, mouse 2 or right click,
Yeah.
and then to ADS, you have to press shift. And so you have, like, these, like, 2 different firing states, if you will. Whereas
Mhm.
Tarkov is like, you're always aiming, hip fire. It's not hip fire, it's like
Yeah.
point shooting.
Exactly, exactly. I think like some other people have said, I've seen people asking for this, that you know ADS would lose you stamina on your arms. Point the point firing would lose it, but very slowly, and that
Mhm.
you'd have like a low ready stance as well. That was more kind of like sustainable. That would just be like your default. And I think that would
Yeah.
kind of make more sense because, like, yeah, literally, like everyone goes around like you're not looking down the side, but you're like this the whole
You're
time
constantly
into your
right.
shoulder, like continuously everywhere, which is fine if you're on something like factory, right? Because you're like clearing rooms and clearing angles and clearing corners and stuff. But when you're like sprinting through shoreline or woods, like you're not gonna have it like up there the whole time. It just doesn't make sense. But
But I think it also, like, plays into what you were talking about with, like, the point fire being too strong. It's like it's honestly like a arcade that I feel like always being able to shoot your gun point fire is plays into more the arcadey side, because that's traditionally how, like, arcade games are. Like, you're just always ready to
that's quite
fire,
interesting, actually. That's a good
so
point.
therefore, you can strafe and shoot. Like, there's no disadvantage to strafing because you're always ready to fire, whereas, like, DayZ, you have if you wanna be mobile, you can't shoot, like, there's a trade-off. So
Yeah.
if I wanna, like, jiggle peek something to see where someone's at, I can't shoot back. If I see him, then I can, but I have to, like, give up my, ability to jiggle peek.
It's a very
So it's an
good
interesting
point.
trade-off.
Yeah, yeah. That really is a great point. Maybe that is why the AD meta is so good in Tarkov, honestly. Because like when you think back to something even like as modern as CS, right? There is no ADS in
Yeah.
CS. And if you painted a crosshair on the screen on Tarkov, it would actually play a lot like CS,
Yes. The
bizarrely.
only difference would be DS has a little bit of inertia.
Yeah, and Tarkov really has no
The
inertia at all.
Right. Which is, I guess, how CS deals with it being too strong. Uh,
Yeah,
I don't
kind.
know.
I don't know, like
Interesting.
because the inertia in CS, it's not super strong, but at the
It's
same
not super
time, like
strong. It's also if you're moving and shooting, you're super inaccurate. I guess there's multiple things they added to
yeah,
sort of to
yeah.
make it like they like bridge the gap between like Half-Life arcade
Mm.
shooter and like a realistic, you know, Counter-Strike, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly.
With like the technology they had. It's actually pretty interesting,
It
huh?
is. I remember the most annoying thing. Actually, there's two things about CS that annoy me. I didn't realize for ages that the shooting
Mhm.
pattern was fixed. I didn't
The
realize that for
shooting
a long time.
pan.
Like the actual like the recoil pattern for all the guns is fixed.
Oh,
It's a fixed
yeah.
pattern, which I didn't realize for a long. I played it for years and didn't know this because I never played it
Mhm.
competitively. I just played it with mates. Because I was always like the competitive. Well, back then I was playing competitive strategy, and
Mhm.
FPS was just like the other fun games that I used to play. And like 3 years later, when I've read this, and I was like, surely not, no way. And then I looked it up, and I was like, oh my god, this is actually true. How the hell did I not know this? Is insane. And the second thing that used to annoy me about CS is the super inertia when you get shot. Do you remember that? Like you're like trying to peek
Yeah,
around the
like it
corner, and
slows you down.
that stops people from doing peeking too, right? Because it's like you try and peek, someone
It
hits you,
is
then you can't
annoying.
move again. You can't get back around the
Yeah.
corner. And I think that's like another element that they added for it. It did feel kind of painful though, because you're like, "Don't get back in, no!" And then you
Yeah.
end up getting killed, or someone's
Yeah.
chasing you and they're like just clip you as you're coming through the door, and you're like super slow trying to get away. It's like one of those horrible dream nightmares where you're trying to run but you can't go anywhere.
But, I wanted to tie it back to Bear TX has a series now. where he talks about questioning Tarkov's realism, and he meant
Okay.
and in this one, part 2 I watched, he specifically talked about what we just kinda went over was, like, the always ready to fire versus, like,
Mhm.
having your gun in your hands, but not necessarily aiming, and he was, like, contrasting it to his airsoft gameplay, and
Yeah.
because he had a cam on his, like, right eye shoulder, and he was kinda, like, showing how, like, when your gun's down, like, you can, like, free look independently, like, you could turn your body and stuff, but then when you have your gun in a ready stance, you know, it's I don't know, it's just like you can't do all the things like, you couldn't, like I don't know, it's just you can't, like, strafe and shoot. I don't know, you have to watch the video. That's like, go watch the video. You'd have to
I think I
see.
watched one of them. I didn't realize it was a full series. I remember seeing some of his
Well,
airsoft clips though, because I did
yeah.
watch one of them, I think, or maybe it was the very first
Yeah,
one ages
yeah,
ago.
yeah.
And it was quite cool because he was talking about like just how it feels about you know, playing airsoft with people that you know as well and that kind of thing. I wonder if you, God, maybe I'm mixing the two videos up because I actually watched a Veritas video recently, which was the latest, like getting Tarkov one, where he makes the
Mhm,
controversial point about like teammate indicators in
mhm.
Tarkov and about have you seen it? Have you seen this latest one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I thought was great. And I have actually talked about this with my real life friends who I got involved in Tarkov and now don't play as one of the
Mhm.
things that like annoyed the hell out of them, which is that you in real life you would know who your friends are because you can just tell right by the way that people walk and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
if you've ever been like, a school or like uni or work or whatever, right? And like you're sat there with a bunch of other people, like you can tell who's walking around behind you just almost because of like the sound of their movement, right? If you know the people well enough, like it's crazy how you can tell who's approaching you without actually even looking at them. It's nuts actually. But in Tarkov, like everyone looks the same, everyone's the same height, like everyone's the same build, and you just can't tell who's who. And it's actually inherently unrealistic not to have some kind of like it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be really obvious, but it was more about like the realistic experience as opposed to you wouldn't have an indicator in real life. It's like, well, you kind of would, like you want to simulate your PMC's recognition of other people. And I thought his idea that was really cool was that like that indicator could potentially get stronger the more you played with people, which I thought would be
Maybe
quite
we could play into, like, the
fun.
memory skill or their skill
Sort something
system.
like that, yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that was good because it was funny. I actually messaged one of my other friends afterwards after I watched it, and I was just like, "You'll never guess what one of the biggest content creators has said about this." And he was just like, "I said you basically said this like 6 months ago," and he was just like, "Yeah, it's stupid." He's actually in the military, and he was just
Mm.
like, "Oh, it's just ridiculous. I don't know who's on my own team. Like it's crazy. This is actually not. It's not realistic that I can't tell it's you or an enemy." Because you'd know, right? You'd be able to see, like, especially if someone's not wearing balaclava or anything. Like, you can definitely tell then. But anyway, yeah, no, I thought that was
I
interesting. I thought it was interesting.
I think what they were going for, um, just to touch on that briefly, was when I played DayZ, I did play for a friend, shout out to Burnt Potato, by the way, and we one of the things that came up, he was like, "Hey, let's take a look at each other and see what we're wearing." And I realized that DayZ, there's a ton of clothing options, and there's even, like, more than 3 faces and 2 factions, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, there's a lot more variety. Like, it would be and you have the armband system, like, I think what they were trying to do is make it so you had to, like, because DayZ doesn't have, like, those built-in stuff, like, DayZ is all about survival, and so, like, players are like an obstacle that, like, you have to survive encounters. Like, I actually ran into s we were s me and my buddy were split, and I ran into an enemy, and they were being friendly, but I was, like, not trusting them, you know what I mean? That was, like, part of the interaction, but
Yeah.
there's VoIP. So I say all that to say I think in their defense, I do agree that I think how the game is, an indicator would be very, very helpful. But I think in their defense, they're trying to simulate this whole, like, uncertainty, of, like, friendly or foe,
Mm.
but they don't have, like, all the support, the foundation to really make that. Because currently the game is shoot on sight, like, there is no point in not shooting someone. Like, why would you not shoot? I mean, that, like, I don't know. The game just does not support that at all.
Yeah,
But
the only reason why you
anyways,
wouldn't is like if you're in a team and you're not sure if it's your own friend or not. That's the only reason why
exactly.
not to. Which is why I quite like playing solo because it's just like gun everybody
You don't
down
have to. Yeah,
immediately.
you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
Everyone's. Yeah,
everyone's an enemy. Shoot anything that moves,
yeah,
which is actually easier in some ways, especially when you're prone at team killing, like I can be.
yeah. Should we jump back on topic? I know we went. I don't know
Yes,
how we got
we managed to go
there, but
heavily off topic. So
yeah,
we finished about the ergo stuff,
right.
and then the next one that I wanted to look at was, I mean, this is wrapped up in kind of like the whole thing that's going on right now, which is the fuel apocalypse,
Hmm.
as I like to call it. But they've increased the cost of the solar power module even more because I guess everybody's trying to rush it to make their fuel cans last longer. And when I looked earlier, fuel cans were going, the metal ones were going for 680k,
Oh my god,
which is pretty
insane.
crazy. And so they've increased the cost of the solar power even more. It now is like 4 of those AESA things, those arrays, and they're 2.8 million each at the moment on the flea. They've changed it from 25,000 euros to 50,000 euros, which is 7.5 million rubles on its own. And then you need 10 mil military cables and 10 filters, which together costs you 1 mil. So, like, the solar panel thing is now a serious amount of money. It was quite a lot before, but now it's like absolutely insane. It's
Yeah,
insane how much it costs, and it's kind of like another way to try and balance the cost of the bitcoins, which is continuing to go up. By the way, I mean I'm astounded, but that's definitely off topic. But I think bitcoins are near $55,000 a piece now, and so that in Tarkov that translates through to about 710k, I think, which is, I mean, it's absolutely insane at this point, right? You get over 2 million rubles per day. I think they did actually increase the time of bitcoins as well as of like
yeah. I
this
saw that as
afternoon
well.
or something. And so it's like
Yeah.
full Bitcoin farm rather than being like 6 hours 45, it's now like 7 hours 10 or something like that. I don't know. I mean, that's not really going to change anything. They're just slowly creeping it higher and higher, which is fair enough. And then I guess another related craft, which is the GPU one, they've also made more expensive. So now it used to be, I think, like, was it like 2 circuit boards or something, and then like 4 CPUs, 2 fans, and a VPX, and now it's 8 circuit boards. So they're like making it harder to craft GPUs in the hideout as well, because I guess a lot of people are crafting that just to plug them into their farm or to sell them. I think when I last looked at those, they were going for 1.3 million on the flea,
What? That's crazy.
which is crazy. I was actually making VPXs because they were going for 400k, and you get 2 of them
I
out of the
heard about
craft.
that. Yeah.
I think Airwing actually did a video about that, but I was doing that beforehand as well, and it was good to see him kind of confirm that was the good thing. But then GPUs have gone up like even further, and VPX has kind of stayed where they are. So I actually switched back to GPUs again.
Hmm.
But it's just, yeah, it's mental, right? The fuel situation is crazy. Like the entire player base pretty much is crying out in pain, and no one knows what to do. You can try to go and get the barters, but pineapple juice is now like 50k because of the
And they've
therapist
increased
thing.
it. It went from 2 juices and 1 super water to 3 juices and 1 super water, and
I
now
don't
it's at
actually. Oh,
4
okay.
juices
Really,
and 1
I don't
super
do that
water.
barter, so I don't know. I just buy
It's yeah.
the things off level 2 Jaeger. I just buy his
Oh,
140k
so
of
you're
fuel
one
can
of
things.
those guys that sits there with his 5 different alarms in every room in his house, and once it goes off, he runs his computer and fucking buys Jaeger.
I kind of would be, although because I upgraded to the solar power quite early. When I fill the generator, it's like 240 hours of fuel,
Oh,
which is
okay.
crazy. And so, like, the last
It
time I
is
put
a
fuel in the
yeah.
generator was probably about 5 days ago, and I still got
Wow,
like
that's
3 or 4
insane.
cans in there, which is insane. So you hardly have to catch any of his things once you've got solar power
Mm,
to refill it, right? It's like each can gives you like 2 days of leeway or something. And
I
so
see.
a couple of times I've kind of like caught it when it's like 20 minutes, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just make a note of that, and I'll pop back
Yeah.
and do it like that, which is sort of the way I've done it. I think the reason why a lot of people are complaining about this, and this is one awkward thing about it. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about like the global limits thing, which is
Okay.
sort of the issue, but like sort of as like an incidental sort of side, just for a second. It's kind of like the way that the traders and the limits are implemented in the first place is a little bit weird, because
Mhm.
a lot of people are like, well, I get to the craft and it's sold out. Like the trade is sold out immediately before I even get to it, even if I wait. But a lot of people don't realize there's like a trick to it, right? Where if the refresh timer between the flea market and the trader are actually not the same,
Yes,
and
I
they're
noticed that.
desynchronized, which is weird, which means that the flea market timer will finish first, but then it will just go gray and say out of stock, and it'll sit
Yep.
there, but there's no timer. And if you keep like either refreshing that or going back to the main trader page and pressing buy, you can actually buy it before the refresh timer goes to 0 on the trader page. And I'm still not entirely certain when that is exactly, but I just go between the two and just keep looking at them and seeing if
Yeah,
the flea
it's out of
market one
sync
turns
for
up, whatever.
sure.
Yeah. And I think so far my experience has been that you can buy it on the trader page before the flea market is even
Yeah,
refreshed, but you use the flea market timer to determine when you want to go and buy it
right.
from the trader page. That seems to work for me. And once you've bought one, it seems to refresh the flea market. So then what I do is I'll go back to the flea market and just press F5 and just watch the numbers going down and seeing how quickly people are buying them, which is very. Um, but yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. So unless you know that like little sort of idiosyncrasy within the way that the flea market and the trade system interact, I don't know why it's like that actually, but it is, and that kind of allows you to actually get it. But I do feel for the people who don't realize that's the case, because by the time it comes through, I mean, there's a good 2 minute difference between the flea market timer and the trader timer, and 2 minutes
Mm.
is way too long. It's like normally gone after like a minute,
Yeah,
or 45
you can miss
seconds.
out for sure.
Yeah, and then it's like, well, then what are you going to do, right? Then you've got to either go to interchange, as chat's saying, it's hard to run because geared people are running it for fuel because they're worth 700k, or you just have to buy one off the flea market and suck it up, which is rough. Or try and do the other barters, get pineapple juice, but it's
But
increasingly difficult.
you know what bothers me about the whole system, and you're probably gonna say this, but I just think it's a stupid system. Why do I have to sit here with my alarm? Like, there's a Discord bot that has an alarm when the trader
Oh,
resets.
really?
Yeah, it's like, this is not good game mechanics. Like, why is the fuel like 5 like 25%, 20% of the cost of what it's selling for the flea market? Like, it just doesn't like, I just can't, Giga, I can't. It's such a stupid mechanic. Why am I sitting here spamming refresh to buy the fuel so I can save 500 rupees? Because why would I like, what's the point? I mean, why is Jaeger so stupid that he can't just increase his prices? BSG has to manually increase the price,
Yeah.
like, it's not gonna surprise me. And then you got the whole thing with the Bitcoin price, right? So it's like this outside economy in a controlled economy environment. So they have this like unpredictable, like people in the real world don't even know what Bitcoin's gonna do. So they're trying to like, oh god, we gotta reel this back. Let's increase solar power, GPU craft. Let's up that, guys. They're like melting over here. Like, why? Like, okay, I think it was a cool idea. It was really cool, but the it was a cool idea. It's not.
Yeah, you're
Bitcoin
saying
is
like,
breaking the game right now. They're
yeah.
trying so hard to reel it back, and then what tomorrow it could crash, and then what? We're just gonna have to like, what are they gonna do? Be like, all right, patch 12.9.1, we're undoing every change to the to all the changes we made. Like, fuel's back in stock, boys. Go get it. You know what I mean? Like, what's going on, dude?
It's very strange. It is quite strange. I quite like. The thing is, right, so like there's lots of problems that I have with the system, but I quite like what's happening in a general sense.
Okay.
I do enjoy this situation. I think it's fun. I think it's good for the game. I think people have been rattled out of their like stupor of just like turn brain off, turn GPUs
Okay.
on, and just print money, right? And I quite like the fact that the game sometimes comes and goes. Oi, sucker, everything you knew about the game. Like, I was joking about it in my Discord, but I was just like, they could do much
Mhm.
more radical things, right? They could have crazy events. They could have crazy events in this game. I was like, imagine if they just said, like, oh my God, like a massive, like, nuclear meltdown happens nearby or something. There's a huge EMP and they literally just blow up everyone's GPUs. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine what the player base would do if they just blew everyone's
Reddit
GPUs
would
up?
explode.
I know, but I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing to do. But I mean, I like it that the games are interesting when there's choices, right? And
Okay.
I don't feel that even if it's kind of like, it makes the game easier, which in some ways it's like, I quite enjoy the fact personally that Bitcoins are ridiculously expensive and that I've already got the stuff to make them, because it means I can basically run any kit and that's fine. But taking a step back and looking at the game from the outside and thinking like, is this really how the game should be? I'm not really sure. And should you just be able to print free money once you get to a certain point? I don't know. Like, yes, you should,
Mhm.
there's RPG elements. You should be able to, do stuff in the hideout, and that's fine, right? Craft things, and, you have the ability to mine Bitcoins and all of that. That's
Mhm.
okay. But there should be like, maybe there should be some more trade-offs or something. Like maybe there's some risks involved. I don't know. But like, I don't like things to just be like a risk-free, like no-brainer,
Yeah,
because it
yeah,
makes the
I
game
agree.
less interesting, right? And people go, "Oh, I'm
Yes.
so bored in the end game," and it's just like, well, no wonder, right? Because it's just like you can print free money doing this. You know all the loot is. It's all in
Right.
fixed spawns and blah blah blah. Right? There's lots of mechanics in this game that are like not unpredictable and are very obvious. And I actually really like. I don't necessarily like the implementation, but I quite like this as a thing, because it's like shook a lot of people out of like what they were doing, and it's like, well, now you just got to change what you were doing. And I think this is good for people. I think this is good for gameplay in some ways. But I mean, to your point before, like, I get what they're trying to do with the scarcity thing. I understand
Mhm.
why they've implemented it as global limits. Um, Having the refresh every couple of like 2 hours or 2.5 hours or something is really strange, and a bad implementation of that. Even though it kind of does what they want, but
Right.
it
I
influences
kinda
player
see
behavior
what
in a
you're
weird way.
saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying, though. I think you have a good point, because now if you can't get the fuel and you don't wanna pay the fee, you can go into raid and get the fuel. That's sort of driving that gameplay element, which adds that risk in, because now you're risking gear to get fuel.
Kind of, yeah. And it's like driving people to do different stuff. So it's like,
Right.
yeah, there were geared people in interchange in Ollie, and it's like, well, this that hasn't really happened before, and people are changing their behavior because
Yeah.
of things that have happened
I see what you're
in the
saying.
broader
Yeah.
economy, which I think is interesting. And it's just like, it means things like, the loot runs change and the hot areas change. And
Mhm.
as we were saying before, it's like, last wipe, um, everybody was after oh god, lead X's, right? Because they're so
Yeah.
expensive. Lead X's, no one cares now, right? Lead X's are what, like 600, 700. GPUs are what everyone wants, and these arrays, those are the things everybody really wants. They're like 3 million or something. And so like it kind of changes the priorities. I quite like that there's stuff that's in flux, and you have to like think a little bit, and it kind of gives the ability for players to sort of like think ahead and predict stuff. It's like me and Erwin talked about last time. We both bought like a ton of GPUs early, but did either of us see the arrays going crazy because everyone wanted to do the solar power? I mean, I didn't really think that far ahead, but you could have,
Yeah.
right? And the fact that that's like the possible, I actually think is quite cool, because it's like, if you're smart about it and actually thinking about it in that way, then like, yeah, obviously you'd have to go and get them and like have them because of the finding raid system, and then store them, and then wait for the price to go up and that kind of thing. But like, it's possible and it's more dynamic. I think it's better than just like do these loot runs. You'll always make money. Get to the Bitcoin farm, like trade your stuff in to get to the Bitcoin farm, and then just print infinite money.
Let me
I
ask
think it's more interesting.
Let me ask you a question.
Mm.
Well, 2 questions. 1, are you finished with your thought before I interject?
Yes.
2, do you think you should have a right to trade or fuel? Is that is the hideout now an is it a necessity to have fuel in your, like, you know what I mean?
I controversially, and I think I maybe have even changed my, because beforehand, right, I just didn't really think of, and I didn't think twice about it because it was so plentiful and it was so cheap. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, it sounds crazy now, right? But you remember a time when you could buy empty fuel boxes for exactly the same price as the full fuel
Yeah.
boxes, because people were making them into mag boxes, and they were both really plentiful, so it was very cheap. So you get full fuel and just turn it straight into mag boxes without even using it because you couldn't use them fast enough. Like, it's
Crazy.
nuts. But yeah, I feel like in terms of because your question is what about I've developed myself already. Your question's about like the right to like trader items. I feel that,
Like, as a player, do I have a right? Is that like a earned privilege to have fuel always ready for me? Or is that
yeah,
because
I
when I
remember
think about
yeah,
it. Well, go ahead, go ahead.
I remember what I was going to say now, which is that after this fuel situation appeared, I kind of like, yeah, because I didn't really think about it before, but I kind of changed my mind about the hideout, and I almost figured that like it should. almost be a bit of a struggle to get fuel. Like, not that you shouldn't be able to use it, but it almost now feels a bit strange to me that you can run your hideout, or that the expectation is that your hideout should be running 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether that's necessarily good. And the traders obviously have a big hand in that, because you can buy this trader fuel from Jaeger. If you know the trick, you can make sure that you get some. And as you said, it's 5 times cheaper than, or 4 or 5 times cheaper than it is on the flea market. Now, I don't necessarily think that is a good idea. What I do think is a good idea, though, is to give people the ability to buy it sometimes. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think locking people out completely is probably the wrong way. But having the trader fuel, like, I don't know, like, because there's other systems that you could use to make this better, right? Things like, there's no restocking kind of situation. Like, traders go in and out of stock of stuff, and if something's out of stock, you can go on a wait list for the next stock. Stuff like something like that, I think would be better, because then you don't just have to sit there and wait, right? And it's kind of like a first come first serve thing, and you can't put an order in for like 10. You have to put an order. You can only put an order in for 1. And so once you've got your 1, you then have to put another order in for another one. And if you don't, then other people are going to get in the queue. And so it'll just be a big queue for it. And maybe he only refreshes like once every day for it or something. So Jaeger on his own would not be enough to run the hideout 24/7. And if you do want to run it 24/7, you have to either go into raid, you have to buy it off the flea market, off another player, etc., something like that. And I think that would make it more interesting. So it's like, you're not locked out. You can run it some of the time. So if if you need to, you can run it. You can get something from Jaeger like every couple of days or whatever, because you go on the wait list for fuel and it comes in and he imports it externally and it's slightly cheaper. That's fine. But I think being able to just, the expectation is run your stuff continuously. Again, I'm not sure if it's really in
Even
keeping with the feeling of the game.
yeah, I mean, maybe you answered my question, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like the something like level 51 strength, for example.
Hmm.
I feel like you put in the work, therefore you expect to be rewarded, and maybe you could argue you should be rewarded.
Yeah,
Whereas something like the fuel, I guess you could argue you put in the work to level up the trader, therefore you should be rewarded. I'm almost starting to think that maybe fuel is just too rewarding because depending on who you are, it's like for maybe like the guy just starting out, it's like, oh, I can craft what's something he can craft that he needs for a quest. A GPU, a flash drive,
yeah,
a you know, something in the work circuit boards.
hmm,
Whereas for, some other guy, like, oh, I can just print money now. you know?
yeah.
So I guess, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, do you think is fuel does a Tarkov player, it's my Russian 2028 right to have fuel in my hideout. You know what I mean? What do you think about that?
I think people feel that it is. You can tell from the
Yeah.
various comments that people are just like, put it back, change it back to the way it was, please,
Yeah.
Nikita, please. Honestly, there's like so much crying. Um, but yeah, I don't really think that, I don't know, like, my views on the way things should go normally ends up going kind of towards the more hardcore end, I think.
Mhm.
And I don't know whether that's just because I played a bunch or got to the end game or whatever, and like, I just think it comes back to the fact that I think I've said this right from our very first conversation, which is that I just don't
Mhm.
really like the traders very much.
Yeah.
And
I kinda agree with you
I
there.
don't mind the flea market. The flea market's okay. I do think it
Mhm.
removes some of the scarcity in the game, as I've said a million times before. But again, as I've said previously, levels 1 to 10 are really hard because you're basically playing
Yes.
hardcore mode. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so difficult. And so the traders only advantage the top end players, which is fine. It's supposed to be an RPG. That's kind of okay. But again, I don't think that anything should be like just being able to buy the fuel from Jaeger is just like it's just too easy, right? It just feels too easy. You just like buy the fuel from Jaeger and you're guaranteed to make money out of the hideout. I think there should be more decisions to be made. There should be more downsides. There should be you should have to make a choice. Like I always like those things in games where it's just like, oh, here's this amazing thing, but and it comes with some kind of catch that you're like, okay, well then I'm gonna have to like be careful around XYZ. And I don't know how you'd really implement that, to be honest with you. But
I mean, when you think about it, the only risk in Tarkov is in gameplay. There's not many risk outside of like the menus. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So anything that's involved in the game has risk. Like I'm like one thing I'm thinking is like because your hideout and your stash, all that is like guaranteed. Like as a and I'm probably like tangenting way off, but the thoughts are coming to me is like lucky scav junk box. Like that's like an investment that has zero risk because you're going to use that space, especially if you're standard account. Like you're going to use that space, and it's like guaranteed safety. It's secured. It's not going anywhere. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, sure, you can't get back that money you spent, but the time and space you save like pays off for it.
yeah.
Um,
But that's like I think that's kind of okay because of the cost, especially when you're like playing early. But like I get what you're saying, right? Because there are different things in the game that I don't think everything needs to have. I guess I don't know. I guess everything needs to have. Not everything needs to have risk on it. Not everything needs to be kind of like upside downside or whatever. But like
well, remember the
it's the
AP.
cost of that though, which is what and the stash space thing is like just kind of annoying, right? It's like I guess
Mhm.
your choice there is to either just keep going and do other stuff, or to invest the money in the scav junk box and then have more storage space. But it's kind of like I mean, storage space is sort of economic, but it's also kind of like just a quality of life issue too, rather than anything else.
Or like to tie it into like the flea market with remember that the 338 Lapua rounds,
Yeah,
like they're only found in raid. So you have to go in the game and risk gear, and if you find it, they're super valuable. Or even like an ASA, you can't get that from a trader. It's super valuable. But it's in high demand. Like to me, things like more things being found in raid only, like more associated risk, just makes the game more interesting. You know?
yeah. I mean, I've always said that I think the traders should have less end game stuff. I think things like the vector shouldn't even be on the traders. To be honest with you, like the thing is, because
Mhm.
you can play the game just fine without having traders have everything. Right? I just don't think it's even necessary. I think they should have
Yeah. No.
like stuff to get you started and maybe some like mid tier mods. I just think like the top end mods, things like the canted foregrips and the big scopes and all this kind of stuff. It should all be fine and raid in my opinion. But that's just kind of the way that I see it. You could play the game with an AK-74M with like BT rounds and a an EKP scope on the top with a bastion on it, right? That's fine. You can kill people. There's no problem. But I just feel like just being able to like easy buy all of the best stuff from the traders, and it's way cheaper than the flea because of the find and raid system too.
Right.
Just kind
And
of
that
like
ties in.
it just undermines the scarcity in the game.
Yeah, and that ties into like the RPG, the reward system. Like I grinded the traders, therefore I should be rewarded. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Like it, but I guess what we're saying is the reward is too good.
yeah. We were saying the reward is so good that it makes the game boring. In fact, it's like
Mhm.
the reward is kind of like if the reward was just like a an I win button every time you entered into a raid, like that wouldn't be good game design. But it would be
Yeah,
progression. Right? It would
it would
reward
be very
players who
progression.
played the longest. You kill a killer 100 times, you can kill everyone immediately after stepping into the raid with one button, right? It's terrible game design, but it's
Right.
progression. And like I don't know, I'm using a stupid example, but it's you know what I mean, right? It's like you can you don't need it to be like that to still reward higher end players.
And I sorry, I just want to say, and I think the gap between 1 through 10 to like even level 20, like that's such a big gap because level 20, assuming you're doing your quest, you have therapist 3, I want to say. So that's like a milestone. You have like Flea market, that's a milestone, obviously. You have Prapper, which is a pretty big milestone. Like, now you can guarantee buy butt stocks really cheap, the rubber butt pads.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you can get decent ammo. I don't think you get BT, but you can get what's the one? BP? I think you can get BP reliably. Like, that's at a fixed price, and if this is early wipe we're talking, then you're saving money. Like, there's like this weird, like, the curve is like it's just like super difficult at the start, and then like boom, level 10, it's like super, like, it's such a huge shift in the curve, and then like there's
Yeah.
like these slow milestones you hit.
Yeah, exactly. And
And it
I
just
don't mind
snowballs.
like yeah, I don't mind those milestones. Like what I would kind of I don't know whether this would be, appropriate for his first step, but like if you just cut off trader level 4 or something and just left the progression to trader level 3 and then kept all the trader level 4 stuff in finding raid. That would kind of
I think that would be pretty
that sort of
interesting.
approximates what I would like, I think.
Yeah.
Because I still, I still talk about this, right? It's like about the top end stuff. I feel like you should almost just have to find all the little pieces of them. I've said that. I think I've said this idea like
Yeah.
25,000 times, but like I would like excitement in the game for finding items, and especially good stuff, and especially if you find them on someone else, not just like, oh, I've killed this dude. Oh, look, he's got a 9mm vector. That's interesting. I can buy that off Skier 3. So, and if I'm not going to, well, if I'm going to use it, then fine. If not, then I guess I just sell it back to the trader because I'm going to just buy it again. Like I don't need to keep it. And then it makes the storage space less valuable because you can just kind of rebuy anything that you need too.
Yeah.
You don't need to actually hold on to stuff either, which
And
is another decision that you might have to make, right? It's just like, well, if you sell some of this stuff back to the traders, but you can't buy them, well then that's permanent. There's no coming back from that, right? And that's like
yeah.
then
Yeah.
it's a more interesting gameplay thing, right? Because it's like, well, do I want the money or do I want to be able to potentially keep this? Well, I
Right.
might use it, but like if I sell it, then it's gone. Right? Whereas right now it's just like shift control click 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 click. If I can't go on the flea market, it's just like right, Ragman Mechanic Jaeger or whatever. It's just like bam 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 out it goes.
Yeah.
So
And when that item is in your stash, it's guaranteed. Like, just how the game's set up. Like, it's not it's safe, you know what I mean? There's no, like, persistent open world.
yeah,
Like, in
exactly.
in the game like DayZ, if you find something really valuable, you can keep it on your person and log out, and it's safe,
Mhm.
but you can only keep so many things in your person,
Exactly.
right? So you gotta store it, and there's that potential loss. Like, it's there's so many, it's like a culmination of a lot of different elements that I feel like the end game just makes it so bleh, you know?
Yeah, well, because I honestly think one of the main reasons why the end game is so boring for people is just because, like, despite most people's best efforts, you end up just making money regardless, even if you're running
Mm,
ridiculous kits. And
mm,
especially now, like this was kind of the way at the end of the last wipe anyway, because usually, right, if you've got yourself to the end game and you've got yourself to, level, well, somewhere above level 45, let's say, because that's when the XP really starts to get insane. I think I ended last wipe because, like, I'll always admit to this. I don't actually play a lot. I think about the game a lot, and I do a lot of like research about the game, but I don't actually necessarily play as much as quite a lot of other people because I spend my time making YouTube videos and researching topics and all that kind of stuff, and then doing this podcast with you, and various other things that I end up doing. So I think at last wipe I ended up at like I don't think I got to level 50. I think I got to level 49 or something. I don't, is that true? Maybe I ended up getting to like low 50s or something. I can't remember. But anyway, once you get past like level 45-ish, I would say, you're probably all right at the game, right, at that stage. And
yeah,
you have
for
enough
sure.
knowledge that you've got the map knowledge down, you've got like the looting knowledge down, you know where people are going to be, you've got a good understanding of map flow, you've probably got full hideout, all the traders are clearly maxed to top level, you've done all the quests that you needed to get there. So you can buy any of the stuff that you want. And so that combination of like, you know, good knowledge, cheap parts, free money from the hideout, and
Right.
probably the ability to survive in raids more so than other people. I think like a lot of new players tend to have a survival rate in like the
But
20s.
I
It
was gonna
can
say 30s, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it can be like as low as 10 up to kind of like
Yeah,
30, something like that, depending on how they play and how much they've researched their extracts and stuff like that.
for
Like
sure.
decent players who've like got to the end game and like played a few wipes, do seem to be somewhere between like, depends on exactly how aggressive they are. It does seem to be somewhere between like 45 and like 60. It really depends on play style. I'd probably sit somewhere in like the 50 to 55 region, I would say. And that just, all of those factors basically means that like you've got this tailwind of money coming from the hideout in the first place. And that was still true in the last wipe. Means that it's very hard to lose money. It's actually very hard to lose money. And now, if you max your hideout out really quickly, it's almost impossible. It's actually now almost impossible. Like, I've just decided to
Yeah.
spend my money, right? Because this way I was doing a lot more like practice for myself, and I think you said the same thing, right? It's just like, don't worry about it too much. Just use the best stuff that you have and just go for it. And doing that, I've basically ended up running like hex grids on factory with the Saga 12, and it's just like you just can't. You just, I mean,
It's really hard
yeah,
to lose
it's
money.
even more amplified for me because I'm playing slightly less, I think, and so I'm still like looking at the game and like
Yes.
running the hideout. So
Right.
economic players like me actually end up getting boosted in insane amounts just simply because it's just like, well, every day you could just like run the crafts and make money, and you don't even have to play.
Yeah.
um,
If you're min-maxing economically and your hideout's max, it compounds, especially if you don't play as much. Like, there's a lot of things that can
yeah,
just, like, make that ruble count just
yeah,
rise.
or it can, yeah, exactly, and it can do, especially if you stop being, if you're not being like min maxy with your kits and you're just running the best kits, but you don't play a great deal, you can just get away with it, and it's hard to
Mhm.
lose money. And then you've got like the guys who play a lot, but the thing is like it's almost kind of goes hand in hand, right? So if you don't play that much, you probably don't have as great a survival rate, or you don't get out with as much good stuff because you lose some fights to some good players. But that's fine because you don't play as much, and the hideout is making more money because you don't play enough raids to lose enough. The guys who play all the time are probably better, so they actually win more of their fights. They take more stuff out of raids, so they actually make more money than you would if you're not playing as
Yeah,
much.
that's true.
And so it's like in both situations you're making money, right? So it's like it's impossible to lose money. And then when it's
Yeah.
impossible to lose money, it means that there's no decisions to make because you run the best kit in every raid. And then it means
Right.
the game's boring because there's no decisions to make. And this is the thing, like it's one thing about game design that I've always been really, I don't know, that I've come to realize is so important, and it's about decisions. Like the more choices that you give the player, most of the time the more interesting the game is. And you need that kind of branching decision tree. Otherwise, things are dull. If it's just like, if you're literally just like, muscle memory autopiloting your way through the traders to build a Meta M4 and smashing yourself through labs, people are going to get really, really fed up. They just get bored. It's not even like the game's bad. They just get bored. People just get bored doing the same thing over and over.
It's like yeah, yeah. No, 100%,
I think that's it.
100%.
And I think like coming back to what the point was before, I think that events like this are quite cool because it shakes it
Mhm.
up and it makes people think about different stuff, and people think about
Yeah.
going to loot fuel rather than going to the labs and killing people, or doing whatever, and go like, oh, I'm a aggressive player who only plays reserve or something, and I just go and kill other people and loot raiders and stuff, and it's just like, oh well, now you actually might have to, not that this is necessarily a good mechanic, but you might actually have to look at the timings and go and like try and buy some fuel from the trader and that kind of thing. So you can't just buy it off the fleet using the money you've made elsewhere because you just can't. It's just so expensive now. That kind of thing changes behavior.
It's so difficult because now I'm thinking about it, when I first played the game, was first learning the game, right? The game felt very different to how it does now because I have the knowledge. And I feel like part of that is because you don't know entirely the rules of the game. You don't even understand the game fully. So
Yeah.
you're learning, and the game is sort of like this survival looter shooter. And then when you hit that point where, like you just said, you got the money coming in, you're well adjusted to the game. The only thing to do really, because all your survival's covered, right? At that point, it's just you're just there to make money. AKA, you fight people because where do people go? They go to the money. So that's why you see PvP and like resort, late game. Like people just rush resort to fight people, essentially,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's where the game, you sort of like split the player base. Like, this is a looter shooter. No, this is a survival game. It's like it's sort of that great divide, I think. Because
Yeah.
some people are really against, like some people I think they prefer the EFT arena, whereas some people I think they prefer the survival parts of EFT. Some people like the realism of it, so they don't like that EFT arena stuff. They want to be more in that other category.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's really interesting.
there's a wide dispersion in terms of like why people play the game. And it's actually the same even for the streamers, right? If you like watch the
Mhm.
various streamers who play, there's actually a big disparity in that too. And people watch different streamers just simply because of like the way they play the game. Like you look at someone like I guess like Deadly's just so experienced that he can kind of do any of it, but like he's much more of like a mil sim end of the, I'll play it tactically because he kind of likes to play it that way and like, sit long range and snipe and like look for information and be like tracking people through the map and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of the way that I envisaged the game in the first place. And then you see other people who are, you know, the landmarks and co, who are, hyper aggressive and not clearly extremely talented at the game too, but they'd rather just like
Mhm.
shift W the way through the entire game and just outshoot everybody, which is also completely valid.
Which
But
I think you
yeah,
can do both, for
Indeed,
sure.
indeed, you can. But I think, like, as a new player, I don't think you realize that unless you've watched a lot of streams. Like, I hadn't watched, I hadn't done anything in Tarkov. I haven't seen any Tarkov before I played. Really, I think I watched like one thing of like Deadly shooting people at long range with a sniper rifle, and that was about it. And
Mhm.
I just didn't even think that like method two was even a thing, because I guess also coming from
Yeah.
DayZ, right?
Yeah.
I knew what DayZ was like, and I knew that Tarkov was kind of like a, an iteration on the same idea distilled down into more focused sort of raid type gameplay. And from there, I was just like, okay, well then this is how the game should play. It's like you'll play like this, and so you don't necessarily consider like, oh well, if I just run around like a lunatic like Call of Duty on Factory, that also works really well. And it's quite interesting how like you said like the only thing to do is to make money after that point, which is basically like my wipe just gone, and then this wipe for me now is just like about me improving my own skills, which I think has answered for me the question of just like, well, what do I do now if I've got Kappa and there's no more quests and there's nothing else to do? It's just like I would like to get better at the game, like, and I think that's a completely valid goal to have. Like it's basically the beginning goal when you're playing anything else like PUBG
Mhm.
or Counter Strike or whatever. Like most of people's goals is just to get better at the game. It's not to like do anything in particular because there is no game outside of the game normally, and so we lose track of that because of the rubles and because of the gear and because of the kit and the cases and traders and the progression and skills and all of this other stuff. We forget that we can just boil it right back down to basics and be like, I'm going to get really good at labs, I'm going to get really good at reserve or
Yeah.
whatever,
For
and just
sure.
work on yourself and work on your own skill set, which is what this wipe is about more so for me. And so far it's going quite well. Just like shift Wing around factories actually been really fun.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I think the only thing I'll say about that is I think that I would like the game to, um, drive that things like that more because I would say that comes internally from within. You're motivated to play the game,
Mm,
um, whereas I would like the game to drive things of that nature. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Am I speaking any.
I think that makes sense. It's actually that links kind of to what chat's saying. There's a question in chat saying like,
Mhm.
free to play battle royales have tried to mitigate this with daily or weekly quests. Could these work in Tarkov? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. And I think you could combine it with like removing some of the top tier loot out of the traders and like link them to quests. I think we spoke. Did we speak about this before as well? Basically saying like, you might have like quests that move one week to another,
Maybe
and it's like maybe we did a while ago, but
yeah, maybe a while ago.
something like, yeah, the vector's not on traders. It is in various loot boxes, but that's, it's very expensive on the flea market because it's quite rare. But then you could have like, a weekly quest where it's just like, oh, there's a big shipment in from Skier's got a big shipment of vectors in. You got to complete such and such a quest, and then you can get one, and it floods the marketplace gets, well, the game gets full of vectors for a week or something, and then
Mhm.
next week is something else. I think that could be quite cool because I could like mix it up, and people would want to complete the quest to use the item that's hard to get normally. Um, or something like the Mark 18, and anything that's a little bit funky, or the grenade launcher. I know, it's like people hate the grenade launcher, but that kind of thing. And yeah, you could use that like daily or weekly quest to like reintroduce some of these items that people don't normally get to use because they're scarce or rare or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I think that
I
could be a way of doing it.
I like the way you, suggested the implementation. Um, I do think that Quest is not I think it's good, but I think it's one of those things that, um how am I trying to say this? When I think of, like, the something like I hate to use this example, like Rust, like, just there's no quest necessarily. It's just, like, the gameplay supports your objectives, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um,
Yes.
that's, like, a very I think it's a good suggestion. I just think it's a very, like, hands-on content. Um, it requires a lot of you know what I'm saying?
I do. It's
I'm
difficult
stumbling.
from a game development point of view. It's quite hard to actually put that in a sensible way into the framework that we have already in Tarkov. I think it would only make sense. The reason why, like those games have a lot kind of longer progression in that way. I think just because like you can kind of infinitely build whatever you like. A bit like Minecraft in some ways, right? It's like
Yeah.
you can kind of do what you like with that, and you can spend as long as you like on it. Um,
They give you the tools, I guess,
yeah,
and you sort of, like, decide your objectives. Whereas,
Exactly. It's a
like
sandbox style, right?
yes, it's more like, yeah, whereas, like, Tarkov is more like, here's how you get to the like, here's your path, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
very, like, defined
yeah. Tarkov's kind of like a linear storyline single player in some ways, in the way that
in some ways,
in the
yeah.
way that the progression functions. Because, like, yeah, you can decide which quests to do for which traders, but they're all kind of going to level up at the same rate, broadly because
Right,
they're level capped. The hideout
right,
always goes the same way because you need set
right,
items and it's very fixed.
and it's good to have a progression, but sort of like there's no, I guess what I'm really trying to say is, like, the end game is because everything we talked about with how, like, the end game becomes so blah, you have to decide internally what your motivation is to play because the game's not motivating you to play anymore, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
exactly. And like people talk about this before about like extending out the progression and like would extending the
Yes.
progression on its own and making the game more grindy, would that by itself help? Things like the extraordinarily controversial suggestion of making the hideout only buildable with finding rate items, which is like shock horror to even suggest such a thing. Because I mean, that would I don't know how I would feel about it if that
That's
happened.
interesting.
It's something that
Yeah.
I can imagine them putting in place, but okay, but maybe very slightly less controversially, making all the barters finding radar. And I think I spoke about that one before, and that's kind
Yeah,
of like
let's
less
start with that
controversial.
before
Like
we start
before we blow the
attacking
entire game
yeah.
up and make it finding raid only. Can you imagine though, like if all the quests are finding raid only, all the hideout equipment was all finding raid only, like it would take
It would take a
forever.
w
And I don't know whether
yeah.
that would be better. Like, is that what people want? They want the progression to be extended out. Well,
Ah,
that means you're gonna have to find all those all those items in raid then, like all those CPU
yeah.
fans, and oh my god, like it would take you a lot. Like I don't even know if
It'd take
you'd
a
finish. Most people wouldn't finish the hideout by the end of a wipe for sure.
yeah,
It would be crazy. It would be crazy. Um,
that's interesting.
but is that good? Is that a good
I
thing?
don't know.
Would that be a good thing that you'd only be able to, do certain parts of it? I'm not sure, honestly. And then the fuel would be really hard to find too. So, you'd only
Mhm.
be able to run the generator sometimes. So it'd be a decision to turn it on. It's like, well, do I turn it on for this craft or not? It's going to make me money, but is it worth the fuel I put in? And then players have choices, and then people are engaged and interested because they have choices to make. I don't know.
Yeah,
It all comes back to choices. Always comes back to choices. It's about like, and this, okay, this is what makes it boring, right? It's about the reason why any economic game is interesting is because you have a limited amount of resource to allocate to things,
yes.
and you
You
have
have
to
to make
decide.
hard
You have to
decisions.
make hard decisions, and you have to decide where those things go. And both of the things you want are good. So there's no shitty choice, right? It's not just like, oh, I have to choose between like not dying and like doing this thing because that's not a real choice. The thing is like I get shiny A or shiny B, and have to choose between them. I can only have one. Both would be awesome, and I don't quite know the long-term ramifications of getting both, but I have to make a decision now with imperfect information. That's what makes a game interesting, you know? And then sometimes
Yeah.
stuff changes in the future and you're just like, damn, I wish I'd done X, Y, Z. And it's I don't know. Maybe like I don't know, like maybe even just reading it all the way back, and I know we're kind of like going a bit over time now, probably at this point, but it's like
Mhm.
reading it all the way back. You could even like you could implement the same kind of thing of hard choices with the traders, saying, well, you either go Peacekeeper and Associated Pals, or you go Prapor and Associated Pals. You could only buy NATO weapons at the top level, or
You picked
Russian weapons
USEC?
at the top level. Yeah,
You're aligned with Peacekeeper. You picked, whatever bear, you're aligned with Prepper. I yeah, that
yeah, and maybe you
yeah,
could change it
that's
over
a good
time. Like maybe you get a boost to begin with or something, and
sure,
like you could defect or whatever if you
sure.
wanted to over time, and that's fine. And maybe
There's
the
so many
hideout
things they
would be
could
the
do.
same, right? Maybe the hideout would be like you can be like gunsmithing, mechanical, like building wires and all that kind of stuff, or you could be like technological, go for graphics cards and that kind of thing. But you can't have both. Maybe, and that would be kind of interesting. I think there's ways of doing it. I don't think everyone should
More
have everything. More choices, more hard
more
decisions.
choices.
It makes the game
Yeah.
more interesting. It means that people have to think about it. And I would also try to do it in a way that means that it's not permanent and you can like unwind it and go a different way, but it wouldn't necessarily be that easy. Because being locked into a path kind of sucks, especially if you've like put 100 hours in or something, and you're into so far into you're 3 months into a wipe and there's not another one for 3 months, and you really regret a decision you've made. Like everyone's played those old RPGs where there's a fixed skill tree and you've gone the wrong way and you've got your character's level 65 and you suddenly realize that it's not viable in the end game and you're just like, God damn it, and then you quit and never play again, right? And so like you kind of want to avoid that, but I also don't think you should just be able to pop open the hideout, go minus 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 and to plus plus plus, and today I'm going to be on this tree. Maybe you don't even make it take any real resources. Maybe it's just like once you've built to a certain level of a hideout, then that's fine. If you want to switch from one to the other, it's going to take you 48 hours to switch your modules over or something like that. So you can't just like instantaneously switch, or it takes longer the higher it is. If it's like a graphics card, well, Bitcoin farm level 3, that's going to take a week to change over into like the workbench level 3 or something. But if it's like level 1 lavatory, you can turn that into a level 1 med center if you so wish. That kind of
They
thing.
could even just have, like, a generic skill system where it rewards you the more you do for that certain, uh like, take the current crafting, how it's just, like, this generic thing that applies to everything.
Mhm.
Like, you craft faster, the more points you have in this crafting skill, whereas now it's, like, these subcategories, like, now you craft faster in the weapon thing, and maybe you could even add, like, an extra element where it's like, yeah, you craft 5% faster in the workbench, but now you have a -1 craft time to all of your other stations, and as you level it up, you're, like, competing interests, I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. How about this? How about you even have like each module has like maybe it's got 3 stages, but it's got kind of like it's got a skill attached to it. And like as
Mhm.
you move from like skill level 1 to 50, it slowly unlocks the different crafts. So you go like you can make painkillers
It's
at level 1, you can make slayers at level 5, you can do it. And so there's always then a little goal, a near goal to reach to. Because I think that's one issue with Tarkov 2 is that the goals they're almost like too big and too far.
Mhm.
Um, and so this way you could kind of like incrementally get little smaller bits and pieces,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
rather than it being like big jumps, which
Yeah, because that's a good point, because there's a lot of things that you unlock that 90% is useless, you only care about the 10% things.
yeah.
Like, I honestly feel like they could have more trader levels and, like, spread out the levels, like, max trader would be, like, level 50 now, and then there's, like, these, like, extra tiers layered in that have, like, these yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, yeah. I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense.
Cool.
They're not just so discreet. All right. Well, yeah, I
Good.
was I was going to finish off with some kind of like a a segment that, but maybe we bring it in for another one. I still probably need to think about it a little bit more.
Oh,
And given that we went over
yeah, the
time
weapon
anyway, like
spotlight.
it's fine. Yeah, I was going to do a weapon spotlight on modding, but I think we'll save it for another time. Given that we had like
Okay.
plenty of material this time for talking about the economy and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
we'll do it another time. I want to incorporate it. I think it'd be quite a nice little thing to do. And some people were asking about it on the channel, like how to do it. And I was like, yeah, I think you could have a subsection for it and just talk generally about that kind of modding. And we'll just have to see how it works out. But yeah, I think we'll
Yeah.
save that for
Let's
another
make
week.
a I forgot, but let's make a real effort next time, 'cause I wanna
That's
see how
that's
that
that's
goes.
completely fine. It's completely fine. I
Yeah.
think it was important to finish our discussion on this topic.
Yeah. I also wanted to say, appreciate the viewers and listeners. Like, your guys' support has been amazing. Um And on the YouTube side, like, I've been reading the comments and keep them coming because a lot of you suggested some really cool things. So yeah, I appreciate you guys. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's super good. Joe's been keeping me up to date with the what's going down on the Anchor site, and I've read some of the comments too on YouTube, and it's fantastic. So thanks everyone for continuing to check in. It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. All right. With that, we'll wrap it up and we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one, everyone.